There's just something about those Arkansas Razorbacks. Welcome into Hotty Toddy Hotline this week, presented by Charter Road Hospitality. We are broadcasting this week's episode from the Holiday Inn Express in Oxford. I'm Routing Stubbs, your host, and this is going to be a very interesting show as we are going to relive the heartbreak that the Ole Miss Rebels suffered last Saturday against the Arkansas Razorbacks. Ole Miss falling 53-52. That one was an overtime. Ole Miss takes the loss and no longer controls their own destiny to win the SEC West. We're going to talk with CRM Sports insider Michael Snowden. Michael will talk to us about what happened with the Ole Miss Rebels. He'll also talk about Chad Kelly's performance. Chad Kelly played the game of his life, or the game of his Ole Miss career, shall I say, as he combined for 6 total touchdowns. But unfortunately, it was not enough as Ole Miss fell by 1 point. But it's not just football that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk Ole Miss basketball. The Ole Miss men's and women's basketball teams played their exhibition games last week. We will talk about those games and look ahead to their season openers coming up this weekend. Also, the Ole Miss soccer team, they're headed to the NCAA tournament. We'll find out who the Rebels are playing and what seed they got. Much more Ole Miss sports coming up on this week's Hotty Toddy Hotline.
Hey, Rebels, your truck is here. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford presents the all-new Ram Rebel. It's Ram, the Rebel way. Send an unmistakable signal. Rebel 24/7. Ram Rebel from your friend in the car business. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford.
Come by, let's be friends.
Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. We're going to talk Ole Miss and Arkansas. Don't know if a lot of you were there, but it was a very exciting matchup. Regardless that Ole Miss lost the game, it was one of those that will stick with me forever. I've been an Ole Miss fan since I was a little kid. I'm 21 years old. I've seen the David Cutcliffe days, the Eli Manning days, saw the Houston Nutt years, and of course I saw the game on Saturday, and a lot of emotions came from it. I have to say, out of every game I've seen at home, that one hurt the most because Ole Miss had multiple chances to win that football game, but unfortunately didn't. But let's talk about kind of how we got to that crazy ending in Oxford. First half was a pretty much even game, a lot of back and forth action. Arkansas, Ole Miss, but the thing that really startled a lot of people was the performance by Brandon Allen of the Razorbacks, their quarterback, known as a game manager. Last year's game against Ole Miss, only 5 for 10 passing, 87 yards through 1 touchdown. This year, completely different player. And Brandon Allen, he's one of the most experienced quarterbacks in the conference, but he's not very flashy. But he made the Ole Miss secondary and the defense look like amateurs out there. Brandon Allen was critical on finding the play-action pass, finding his tight ends wide open. Really just did a great job through the deep ball. Tony Connor returned for Ole Miss, but he clearly wasn't 100%. He got beat on several plays in that football game, and Brandon Allen was just phenomenal for Arkansas. But halftime, was 17-17, and it seemed like, okay, Ole Miss, they got a challenge. Arkansas, they are not going to just come into Oxford and get blown out. They're going to compete. That's what Ole Miss thought. In the second half, Arkansas, they came out very, very motivated in this football game, and Ole Miss, things got pretty nervous there in the fourth quarter. But overall, going into the fourth quarter, again, the game was tied. So after the first quarter, game was tied 7-7. Second quarter, game was tied 17-all. In the third quarter, score was 31-all. Chad Kelly was phenomenal in this football game. He finished 24 up 34 for 368 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, that's usually the end of the box score you see from Chad Kelly. Chad Kelly, not really a guy that puts up numbers like Marcus Mariota did at Oregon or Vince Young at Texas, where quarterbacks rush for over 100 yards per game. But Chad Kelly, 11 attempts, 110 yards rushing, and added 3 touchdowns. He carried this Ole Miss offense in this football game. The receivers, they were very solid too. Treadwell came up. He showed up and showed out. 7 catches, 132 yards, 1 touchdown. Markel Pack, the surprise, 5 catches, 76 yards. Cody Core, 3 catches, 48 yards. Quincy Adebojo, 3 carries, 37 yards. And Anthony Ingram, 3 catches, 35 yards. Jalen Walton added 76 yards rushing for the Ole Miss Rebels and 1 touchdown. But this game, it was a game where it literally not one defense could get a stop. Kept going back and forth in this fourth quarter. Arkansas climbed up to a 38-31 lead. Then 2 touchdowns scored by Ole Miss put Ole Miss up 45-38. And then in the last minute of the game, Ole Miss, could have stopped Arkansas, the last drive of the game, but Arkansas tied it up at 45. Many thought, would they go for 2, try to end it in regulation, but they kicked the field goal or the extra point. The game was tied at 45. And then here's where the game got really, really, really crazy. It was in the fourth quarter, with just 40 seconds left in the game. Ole Miss dropped a third down completion that could have gave them a first down past midfield, but it was a 4th down and 6. Ole Miss had the ball from midfield, and 30 seconds left. Hugh Freeze decided to go for it. On 4th and 6, and they didn't get it. But fortunately, that did not end the game, as Brandon Allen, after that, completed a 21-yard pass to Dominic Reed for a completion that went to the Ole Miss 30-yard line. Arkansas attempted a 47-yard field goal. A lot of people thought the game would be over then, but the 47-yard field goal attempt was blocked by Tony Bridges. Tony Bridges played horrible in this football game defensively, but he did come up to play when it mattered most at the very end, as he blocked the 47-yard field goal attempt. Overtime. Ole Miss got the ball start, took it right down, and scored 25 yards on a Jalen Walton big carry for 14 yards. Got Ole Miss inside the Arkansas 11. Chad Kelly punched it in for a touchdown 2 plays later. So Ole Miss had the lead. Then this is where the game just got really, really crazy, as Arkansas, they're down by 7 points. They're down 52-45, and it seems like Arkansas was just about out of gas by then, because they struggled. They in overtime on their drive where they scored, they got in the tough position. Arkansas, they committed 2 penalties that put them at a 3rd and 25. Arkansas had an incomplete pass on a 3rd and 25. And then on 4th and 25, this is where the craziness happens, as Brandon Allen completed a 14-yard pass to Hunter Henry. And then Hunter Henry, it's not in the rule book. Like, the word lateral is not in the rule book, but he clearly threw the ball behind him. The ball was recovered by running back Alex Collins, who rushed for 31 yards to the Ole Miss 11-yard line for a first down. And he picked up the first down. Heck of a run. It just so happens that the one player that picked up the fumble was the running back. And, usually, I would say the running back is not going to pick up that ball. It really could be anyone. It could be a lineman, could be the quarterback, but it happened to be the running back, the fastest guy on the team, who picked up the first down. And then Ole Miss had a tough breakdown on defense, as Arkansas, they scored on a 8-yard touchdown pass from Brandon Allen to Drew Morgan. And then Arkansas, guess what? They kept their offense on the field. They went for 2. Brandon Allen took the snap and was looking for an open man, couldn't find anyone, and he got sacked by Marquise Haynes. But there was a penalty for a face mask. It was, really, it was Haynes. All he had to do was tackle Brandon Allen. That's all he had to do. But no, he grabbed his face mask, and that ultimately gave Arkansas another chance as they had the ball from the 1 yard line on a 2-point conversion. Arkansas kept their offense on the field because they were 1 yard forward, and that was it. Brandon Allen rushed the ball in for the 2-point conversion, and your final score read Arkansas 53, Ole Miss 52. So Ole Miss, they could have won this football game. I mean, just a crazy play that happened by Arkansas where I guess it was technically in the stat book called a fumble, where the tight end, Hunter Henry, threw the ball behind him, which was recovered by the running back, Alex Collins. I mean, that was just, I hate to say it, but that was the most Ole Miss thing that could happen. I mean, Ole Miss is a school in football. They've had a lot of bad luck. And that was one of those plays. I mean, the fact that Arkansas, not only did they recover the ball, but they rushed it for a first down. And, apparently it was a legal play as we saw after the football game. There were some things that I saw on Twitter. Greg Sankey, who of course is the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference now that Mike Sly retired, he agreed with the explanation that it was a legal play. But other media members, I was in the press box when it happened, and keep in mind this is a 4th down, a 4th and 25. So I'm going to read you the rule book from the NCAA's handbook, which says on 4th down, before a change of team possession, when a team when a Team A fumble is called or recovered by a Team A player, other than the fumbler, the ball is dead. So they ruled in the stat sheet that Hunter Henry fumbled the ball when he threw it behind him. The rule book says that if anyone other than the player that fumbled the ball recovers it, then the ball should have been blown dead. That's according to the NCAA. Very controversial finish in Oxford. I really can't give you an opinion on it because I truly don't know much about this rule, but I did read you what happened from the handbook. Of course, there is no anything about a lateral in the handbook, but that's what was said. Ole Miss, of course, falls 53-52. Players were pissed off after the game. I was on the field. I was shooting some video and heard a lot of frustrated Ole Miss fans. And, I saw some of the fans even threw some cups on the field. Just a heartbreaking scene there at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium at the very end of that football game. Just, the fans were quiet. Arkansas was, of course, celebrating. And Brandon Allen, the quarterback, was kind of injured when he scored the 2-point conversion. He is all right, but, all the players rallied around him. So, it was a little bit quiet, and just a heartbreaking loss for Ole Miss. I mean, we're going to talk more about it later with Michael Snowden, but, this 2013 recruiting class, it was a top 5 class. You had Laquan Treadwell, Larry Tunsil, Robert Medici. The fact that they're probably not going to win the SEC West, that hurts. That's something that they're going to look back on this game, 20 years from now in their lives and say, hey, we had a chance to take care of business against Arkansas and then hopefully try to win out against LSU and Mississippi State, and then we could have won the SEC West. Just a heartbreaking loss for the Ole Miss Rebels. That loss dropped them out of the top 25 in both polls. It's not likely that a 3-loss team is going to be ranked at this point in the season. So Ole Miss, they do fall out. Arkansas improved to 5-4 in the season. So Ole Miss is 7-3, 4-2 in SEC play. That's it's. I mean, I'm pretty much speechless. I mean, I was heartbroken myself. I'm sure a lot of you guys were as well. But you know what? I think this bye week is going to help Ole Miss because they do have 2 rivalry games coming up, of course, against LSU and against Mississippi State. There's still a lot to play for. A lot of money, I guess you could say, is at stake with Ole Miss. And what I mean by that is, Ole Miss, if they lose out, finish 7-5, they're likely headed to whether it's Nashville, Mobile, Birmingham, Memphis for a smaller bowl game. But if they can win one or two of their next two games, hey, they might be in position to, play in a Florida Bowl, whether it's Outback Bowl, the Gator Bowl, the Citrus Bowl, or even hopefully get to Dallas and play in the Cotton Bowl. I mean, still a lot of scenarios, still a lot to play for if you're an Ole Miss fan. I was doing the research, and the most likely situation that Ole Miss could win the SEC West, and yes, there's still a chance, that would be if Alabama loses one of their next two conference games against Mississippi State or Auburn, and then Ole Miss would have to win out. In that scenario, Ole Miss and Alabama would both have two conference losses, but Ole Miss would have the tiebreaker over Alabama because they, of course, beat Alabama. So that's the only way the Rebels can win the West. I mean, certainly you're asking a lot. Could State, State and Auburn, they are at home. Auburn obviously not as talented. I don't see them pulling an upset over Alabama. But State, they're ranked number 20 in the newest AP poll. They certainly could pull an upset if Dak Prescott has an incredible game for them. But it's going to be a tough one in Starkville. That one is actually next Saturday is when Mississippi State plays Alabama. It's going to be a 2:30 kickoff on CBS. So if you're an Ole Miss fan, still have belief in this team, you got to root for the rival, Mississippi State, in that one. Well, just basically I did the best I could to wrap up how that game turned out, but we'll have much more insight on Hotty Toddy Hotline later on in the show. We're going to be joined by Michael Snowden coming up on the other side of the break. Michael of CRM Sports is going to give his thoughts on the heartbreaking Arkansas loss, and then plus later on the show, you make sure you want to stick around to listen to some Ole Miss basketball talk. The men's and women's basketball teams are prepared for their opening game this week. Keep it here on Hotty Toddy Hotline. Welcome back in the Hotty Toddy Hotline. We're now joined by CRM Sports insider Michael Snowden. Michael, how's it going?
Pretty well, Browning. How are you?
Still trying to recover from that Arkansas game. I'm sure you are as well, right?
Yeah, it was not a fun game yesterday, watching it here and, wanting to stay warm. I've learned my lesson from a couple of games last year. Don't go if it's too cold and you don't think you're going to get a guaranteed win. So I guess that's a fair weather fan. But either way, tough loss yesterday.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. Not a whole lot to say. Not a lot of excuses for the Ole Miss Rebels, Michael. But, talk about what you saw from Arkansas and just, it was quite surprising that their passing game from Brandon Allen outshined the running game.
Arkansas impressed. I don't know if it was a bad defensive day for Ole Miss or if the defense is just overrated or if Arkansas is underrated on the offensive end of the ball. But either way, that was a hell of a game yesterday for Brandon Allen. He was just completing passes left and right. The Ole Miss had absolutely no answer for the play action. They probably ran the same play at least 20 times in that game, kept on picking up yards. And, it was just a wild game throughout. Arkansas, they were relentless. They went all out. They just kept on going the offensive end. There was almost no defense in that game yesterday. I think the most impressive defensive play of the game was probably a blocked field goal, which didn't even end up mattering. And obviously can go back and forth on that lateral play. But Arkansas came to play yesterday, and they have now gotten Ole Miss on back-to-back years. And just a really unfortunate loss. But you know what? Ole Miss didn't come to play, and they costed them. They're 7-3 with a tough two next games coming up. They've got to deal with LSU, who's already mad coming off their loss. And then you got to play Dak Prescott in Mississippi State in his last game in Starkville, and that's going to be emotional for him. So this is going to be a long road for Ole Miss. I think this season can go one of three ways, and hopefully they're 9-3. But odds are it's looking at 7-5 right now. So hopefully they can figure it out.
I did want to get your opinion on the lateral or fumble, whatever you want to call it. A lot of people are saying that it was an illegal play because the tight end Hunter Henry technically fumbled the ball when he threw it behind him. And since it was a fourth down, the ball had to be recovered by the player that fumbled the football, but it was not. It was recovered by the running back Alex Collins. I mean, but, apparently, the SEC, they said it was a legal play. But, I mean, what was your opinion on it?
Well, when I was watching it live, I didn't understand why they didn't tackle him out of bounds. That's usually one of the first things you're supposed to do. And then when they threw the lateral play, I thought when it hit the Arkansas player's hand and he didn't catch it and it hit the ground, I thought that was supposed to be an immediate dead ball in the game. So I thought the game was over at that point. No refs did anything. And of course, out of 60,000 people in that stadium, it lands right to the best runner on the entire field, and Alex, Collins, I believe. That was just unfortunate. It was just jaw-dropping. I mean, there's really no words to describe a play on that. When you're 4th and 25, you have the game won. You've done everything you needed to do. You tackled the guy. I mean, you've literally done everything possible to win the game at that point. And Arkansas just somehow found a way, took it 28-something yards, got the first down, and the rest is history from there. But I think that is probably up there with one of the most heartbreaking losses for Ole Miss, not only because it ended any hopes they had pretty much of getting the SEC West, but also due to the fact it was just, it was just depressing. I mean, you don't ever want to have to go, oh, well, man, we lost on a lateral. I mean, it's just a very hurtful loss, and it's going to be interesting to see how Coach Freeze talks to his players. I mean, they've got 2013 class. Their goal was to get an SEC title. That's not possible anymore. Now they're staring down a game against the number 9 team in the nation, LSU, and possibly a ranked state team. We'll have to see what happens with Bama. But they've got a long road ahead. So this will be interesting to see what happens, how Hugh Freeze regroups and tries to get them into a decent bowl. But final opinions on that play, just a 1 in a trillion. Arkansas got unbelievably lucky, and sometimes luck is better than skill, and that statement was proved yesterday with that play.
Michael, you said the season could go one of 3 ways. Obviously, if they don't win a game, they'll be in a bad bowl game, huge disappointment. But, I'm an optimist. I'm a fan. If Alabama gets beat by State or Auburn, Ole Miss wins out. Ole Miss does win the West, but how important do you think that it is Ole Miss has this bye week where that they can focus on, preparing for their 2 rivals? Because honestly, if they didn't have this bye week, I think the season possibly could have just collapsed. But how do you see it, the season playing out with the bye week?
My opinion, I think the season's over. As I've spoken with you outside of work, we've talked about how I've just become a realist with sports, and I really do think the season's over for Ole Miss. I feel like a couple of those players are going to just think, you know what, this is over. There's really nothing left to play for. I do think, however, though, that some players will have it in their mind. This is their last game at the Vaught. They're going to try and do everything they can to make those fans happy, see them one last time in person. I feel like Laramie probably will have a good mindset going into this game. He missed most of the season. He's going to give everything he can to maybe get one more win in the Vaught. But in my opinion, I think Ole Miss drops both games. I think LSU is going to come in here. I think because they're still trying to go for a bowl. I mean, they're probably not going to make the playoff, but they can still make a New Year's Six bowl. And I think they're going to play with some anger. They're not going to want to come into Oxford and lose to Ole Miss because that could really hurt their chances at that. So I think LSU is going to come in. I think they're going to win that game by 13. And I think Ole Miss is going to have a very close game in State heading in midway to the third. And then I think State is going to pull away and defeat Ole Miss and drop them to 7-5. And I think Ole Miss will beat whichever mediocre team they play and whatever mediocre poll they get to. So it'll be interesting to see what happens for sure. But it's truly unfortunate for Ole Miss. I think yesterday pretty much just set the tone with what we're going to see the rest of the way. It's going to be tough, but that happens sometimes. So it'll be interesting, but hopefully they can get a win. But I just don't see it happening.
Michael, I think what you just mentioned, that's the worst case scenario for Ole Miss the rest of the season. If they get beat by their rivals and then flat out lose to whoever they might play in a bowl. I mean, if they lose out, that'd be terrible. But this team's still a lot of talent. Offense played phenomenal under Chad Kelly against Arkansas, but the defense is certainly a lot of problems, a lot of questions. I mean, how do you see the future of this team turning out? Do you think that Hugh Freeze will, on offense, give away his play calling, or do you think that Ole Miss might need to go in a different direction under Dave Womack, or should there just be any more changes? I mean, what do you think's best for the future for Ole Miss football?
Well, I think next year fans are going to need to be patient. I mean, you got to look at who all we're losing. Everybody from the 2013 class, C.J. Johnson will be gone. Jalen Walton will be gone. We're losing a lot of people. Denzel will be gone, but most of the defense will be gone. I think Chad will still be back. I think next year, especially with the opening schedule, Ole Miss has got to play Florida State in a neutral site game, Wofford, which will be, a win. But you got to deal with Bama and Georgia and Memphis. And that's just not an easy opening 5-game stretch with a rebuilding team. I will say this, however, if Hugh Freeze can manage to somehow after this season keep getting the recruits that he's already got committed, I think the future will be a little bit brighter now that Hugh Freeze will already have one top recruiting class under his belt. I think he'll be smarter. I think he'll make better decisions in the play calling. I think he'll trust his field goal kicking a little more. I think he'll tighten up on certain aspects. I don't think he'll be going for stupid fourth downs anymore. That's been kind of a killer for Ole Miss this season. But Shea Patterson right now is committed. Benito Jones is committed. Dede Bowie from the 2017 class is committed, but he could easily flip back. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Hopefully the new young talent next year can build their way up and can try to get Ole Miss going back in the direction people thought it was going to go last year. But it's the future next year is not going to be bright. It's going to be a rebuild year. I think if for people, Ole Miss fans, they just need to be patient and wait for a minute. I think 2017 is going to be the next time Ole Miss is relevant in the SEC championship talk. But for now, it's just kind of wait out and see how it goes.
Michael Snowden, thank you for talking football. Michael's going to stay on the phone with us, and we'll talk some Ole Miss basketball. Rebel Hoops just getting started this week for their first game of the season. Keep it here on Hotty Toddy Hotline.
Because you want more flavor, at Nuke's we marinate and grill to perfection. Because you want the latest culinary tastes and trends, we never rest. At Nuke's, great food drives us. So we are meticulous in our preparation, obsessed with the quality of our ingredients, and uncompromising about serving you our very best. We believe that sharing a memorable meal is one of life's ultimate pleasures. Join us at Nuke's Eatery.
All right, welcome back in the Hotty Toddy Hotline. Let's talk some Ole Miss men's basketball with Michael Snowden. Michael, Ole Miss won the exhibition over Clayton State 103-87 last Thursday. Stephon Moody scored a game-high 25 points. Sebastian Saiz, a double-double, 15 points and 14 rebounds. Michael, let's kind of go tell the tape with Ole Miss here. They lose a lot of seniors from last year: Aaron Jones, Jarvis Summers, MJ Rhett, and Ladarius White. Of course, Dwight Colby transferred, so a lot of new players on this team. A lot of challenges. Stephon Moody, he's going to step into the leadership role for Ole Miss. Overall, what's your outlook on the Ole Miss men's basketball team?
Well, I think it's going to be a fun year. It's obviously, Ole Miss, the good thing is no one really expects anything out of the Ole Miss basketball team. They just kind of what happens. But I think it'll be a fun year. going to be led by Moody and Saiz. Moody's playing for, he looks like he wants to play overseas. So he's going to be playing pretty well this year. I think Saiz will see some improvement from him. It'll be definitely a fun year. I'm definitely looking forward to it. It's a fan to get back out there with the unicorn mask, but it's always fun to go to the Tad Pad and getting this last couple of games in before SEC opens, and then the new building comes in the pavilion. So that'll be also a milestone in Ole Miss athletic history. Hopefully we can get started off right when we start in January. And hopefully it'll be a fun season. But, a lot of people don't realize how competitive the SEC is going to be this year. I mean, the SEC has some very stacked teams. You've always got Kentucky, but a lot of people don't realize is Alabama hired Avery Johnson, the former NBA head coach, to get down there. He's already making an impact with some players. And LSU brought in the top overall recruiting class, the number one player in the country, and Ben Simmons, or in the I guess world you want to call it, since he's from Australia. Ben Simmons, and the number 13 overall recruit, and I believe someone in the mid-30s. So LSU is going to be a very deadly team this year. They're my dark horse to win the SEC because I think Kentucky's going to have a down year, and I think it's going to be a very competitive year. I mean, Tennessee's still going to be good. It's going to be fun for sure, but Ole Miss is going to have a lot to deal with this year.
That's right, Michael. Ole Miss, they are coming into this year. They got to get a new point guard. Could be JT Escobar or Sam Finley, but they do have, three returning starters: Martavius Newby, Stephon Moody, Sebastian Saiz. What do you think's going to be the biggest challenge for Ole Miss this season as far as how they're going to replace guys from last year? Is it finding good point guard play, or is it finding good interior play now that guys like Rhett and Colby are gone?
Yeah, I mean it'll be definitely interesting to see what happens. I mean, when you lose post presence like that, it's always hard to see. But I mean, Ole Miss is kind of a jump shooting team, regardless. It'll be interesting to see. I think Stephon Moody will have to carry a much bigger role this year. Obviously, just being the player that he is, the talent that he's got. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But I mean, it's a work in progress. Hopefully Andy Kennedy can get the recruiting going, get some big men. But I mean, this will definitely be led by Saiz and Moody. I mean, they're going to have to pull most of the work, and we're going to have to see what happens as far as that goes. But I mean, I'm looking forward to a good year. I think Ole Miss will play well. I don't know if they'll get into another NCAA tournament berth, but it'll be a fun season for sure.
That had to do with my my next question. I wanted to ask you, do you think this team was tournament bound? As of now, you don't think that they are, but what's it going to take for them to change your mind?
My take on what?
If you said you don't think Ole Miss, you think it'd be a long shot for them to make the NCAA tournament, what would it do for them to change your mind?
Yeah, I think LSU is going to be unbelievable this year. I think Kentucky, obviously, got to deal with them. And I think, honestly, I do think Alabama is going to be a lot better. And Florida will be an interesting team now that Donovan's gone. But it's just a very competitive conference. It's getting better all the way around. I just don't see Ole Miss having the firepower that they had last year to be able to get there. But I'll tell you what I am really looking forward to this year is the Ole Miss-Memphis game. I mean, Memphis has historically been a much better basketball team than Ole Miss ever has. But, Memphis is in a very, very down state of their program right now. They have that's going to be at the Forum, I believe, December 18th, which is going to be a very fun game to see. And I think if Ole Miss could get that win, that would be a very, signature win for their season, just to say, hey, we got a solid non-conference win. And I hope the Ole Miss has got to take care of the easy games like they've got coming up this week. So it'll be fun to see, regardless of what happens.
Yeah, and Ole Miss will have to get revenge on Memphis in basketball now they lost to him in football.
Right.
Michael, before I let you go, want to get your outlook on the Ole Miss women's basketball team. Of course, Matt Unsel's Rebels, they were picked 6 in the SEC this season at Media Days. Of course, they're trying to replace Tia Faleru at power forward. This team, they're young and improving. What's your outlook on them so far this year?
I think women's basketball team will have a good year this year. I mean, they had a couple of marquee wins last year. They had some upsets and they played well at certain times, and they played badly at certain times. So I mean, it's a very inconsistent team, but it's a good team. There's talent there. They're trying to get everything they can to get where they want to be as far as championships and possibly an NCAA berth goes. Hopefully they'll be able to make a better stand this year than they did last year. But they're definitely on track and wanting to get a much needed successful season, and looking forward to see what they can do this year.
Michael, I want to thank you for coming on Hotty Toddy Hotline this week, and hopefully things will turn out all right for the Ole Miss football team.
Yep, hopefully so, and anytime, Brownie, and I hope you have a good day.
Follow Michael on Twitter at MVSupport. Grizz, we're going to talk SEC coming up on Hotty Toddy Hotline. Welcome back to Hotty Toddy Hotline. We are now going to talk about the SEC and where Ole Miss stands now that they lost. We saw on Thursday night Mississippi State beat Missouri 31-13. Bulldogs stay in the top 25. Florida with the narrow win over the Vanderbilt Commodores 9-7. Florida had to kick a game-winning field goal with just 2 minutes left in that game to win it. Florida now wins the SEC East crown. Georgia, Mark Richt keeps his job for another week as they beat Kentucky 27-3. We talked Mississippi losing to Arkansas 53-52. Tennessee gets the win 27-24 over South Carolina. Auburn pulls the upset over Texas A&M on the road 26-10. And then that crazy game, Alabama and LSU 30-16. Alabama wins. The Tide holding Leonard Fournette to only 31 yards on 19 carries. So what did Alabama have to do to win that game? They had to shut down Fournette and make the LSU Tigers throw the ball. They were successful on both of those, as Brandon Harris, quarterback for the Tigers, threw 6 of 19 for 128 yards, touchdown and an interception. So LSU did not throw the ball well at all, didn't run the ball well, and that's how Alabama got the win. Expect Alabama, of course, to be in the top 3 in the college football playoff rankings. And now we can, we talked about the scenarios earlier in the show. Alabama, they now control their own destiny to win the SEC West. Only conference games they have left are Mississippi State and Auburn, while Ole Miss would have to get a loss from Bama in one of those games, and Ole Miss would have to win out. LSU, same thing. They have to win out and have to get a loss from Alabama. Big game in Starkville this weekend. It is the bye week for the Ole Miss Rebels, so it's going to be interesting how things turn out around the conference. Some other big games this week. Arkansas does play LSU, so maybe Arkansas can give LSU some fatigue when the Tigers come to Oxford, as Arkansas is no pushover, as we clearly saw that as evidenced this weekend in Oxford. That wraps up SEC talk. We do want to thank Charter Road Hospitality here at the Holiday Inn Express in Oxford. We are broadcasting in the lobby. You've seen a lot of people come by throughout the show. They're very excited about their stay here in Oxford. Of course, there's Ole Miss basketball coming up this week as the Rebels, men's and women's, play their first game of the season. But if you want to check into Holiday Inn Express in Oxford, it's 112 Heritage Drive. Call them 662-236-2500. Also, right down the hill by the Huddle House at 110 Heritage Drive. That's the Hampton Inn at Oxford, over by the Conference Center, Hampton at Oxford, and Town Place Suite. So a lot of great places of Charter Road Hospitality for all of you to have a comfortable and nice day. My parents were staying at the Hampton Inn by the Conference Center. I actually slept in a spare room that they had last night as well. So it was a pretty fun weekend at the Hampton Inn. All right, we're going to be right back on Hotty Toddy Hotline, and we'll look around at more Ole Miss sports.
Hey, Rebels, your truck is here. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford presents the all-new Ram Rebel. It's Ram, the Rebel way. Send an unmistakable signal. Rebel 24/7. Ram Rebel from your friend in the car business. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford.
Come by, let's be friends.
Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. Now we're going to look at the Ole Miss sports schedule coming up this week. Obviously, Ole Miss basketball, now that football is over, or not over, but now that a lot of the hype with football is probably done, now we can turn our attention to Ole Miss basketball. Of course, the Pavilion at Ole Miss opens January 7th, Ole Miss versus Alabama in that one. But the Rebels will be in action on Friday in a game against Northwestern State. Friday night, that tip-off is set for 6 p.m. You know, we remember last year's loss to Charleston Southern, so I don't think that'll happen again this year, but you really have got to be prepared no matter who you play in the SEC, so hopefully Ole Miss won't come out flat. Hopefully they'll put a pounding on Northwestern State. And the Ole Miss women's basketball team, they play their first game in the Kids' Day game at 11 a.m. on Friday as well against Mississippi Valley State. A lot of the kids will get the day off from school, and they'll be able to go watch the Ole Miss women's basketball team play basketball at the Tad Pad. That's the last it'll be the last Kids' Day game at the Tad Smith Coliseum before Ole Miss moves over to the Pavilion. So great basketball action coming up this weekend at as the Ole Miss basketball teams will hopefully try to start 1-0 on the season. Now, Ole Miss soccer. Ole Miss soccer, they, of course, played in the SEC tournament last week, fell to Texas A&M, and the NCAA tournament selection show will be tomorrow on Monday. That'll be at 3 p.m. We'll find out who the Ole Miss soccer team is playing in the NCAA tournament. That's going to come up in a week. We'll see if Ole Miss will be hosting a game as well. Volleyball did get the big win over the weekend on Friday as they did beat the Arkansas Razorbacks. They would take that one in 4 sets. So at least Ole Miss did win something against Arkansas over the weekend. It wasn't football, but it's good that the volleyball team, they've been very inconsistent this season, but it's good to see them and Coach Stephen Roberts get a big win because they really need something to boost their confidence, as this has not been the season that we would have liked to have seen from Coach Stephen Roberts. And, pretty veteran team in the Ole Miss volleyball team. Of course, Nikita Clare and Aubrey Edie, a lot of those guys will be graduating, and hopefully they'll have a big run down the stretch of the season as the volleyball team could still make some noise if they do well in the SEC and NCAA tournament, but they're going to have to win a lot of these big games coming up down the stretch of the season. So, all right, well, that wraps up. We talked Ole Miss football, how Ole Miss lost to Arkansas 53-52. We talked Ole Miss basketball with Michael Snowden. I want to thank Michael for coming on the show this week. And we talked about Ole Miss soccer and volleyball. Follow me on Twitter at Browning Stubbs. Like the Facebook page at Hotty Toddy Hotline. Follow us on Twitter at Hotty Toddy Hotline. For our executive producer, John Raw, this has been a production of CRM Sports on the Colonel Rabbit Radio Network. We'll see you next week.